The world outside has finally fallen into a heavy, obsidian silence. But inside the labyrinth of your mind, the echoes refuse to fade. You are here because the day was too loud, and the weight of your thoughts has become a burden you no longer wish to carry alone. Tonight, we are not merely seeking rest. We are stepping into the shadows of ancient Japan and China to find the light that only reveals itself when the sun goes down. These are not just stories, they are mirrors held up to your soul in the quietest hours of the night. Do not try to understand them with your logic. Let them sink into your marrow like the scent of cedarwood in the chill of mountain mist. We begin at the foot of a mountain where the fog clings to the trees like a forgotten memory. There sits a small hut, a skeleton of bamboo and wood belonging to a man named Ryokan. He owns nothing but a single bowl and the robe on his back. Yet the air around him feels thick with a peace that gold could never buy. One evening, while Ryokan was away visiting a sick friend, a thief crept through the darkness, his heart pounding with the hunger for something valuable. He expected silk, perhaps silver or sacred artifacts. But as he searched the bare corners of the hut, he found only shadows and dust. There was nothing to take. When Ryokan returned and found the intruder trembling in the corner, he did not scream for justice. He did not feel violated. Instead, he felt a profound, aching compassion for this man who had climbed a mountain only to find emptiness. Ryokan stripped off his own robe and handed it to the bewildered thief, apologizing that he had nothing more to give. As the thief fled into the night with the stolen garment, Ryokan sat naked under the vast silver eye of the moon. He whispered to the wind that he wished he could have given the man this beautiful moon, for the robe would eventually tear, but the light of the moon is eternal. We often spend our lives locking doors and guarding shadows, forgetting that the only things we truly possess are the things we are willing to give away. Can you feel the weight of your own attachment softening in this moment? The moon does not belong to Ryokan, yet it is his entirely, because he has no need to own it. Now, move deeper into the forest, where the scent of incense drifts from a stone temple. Here lives Eshun, a woman whose beauty was a flame that many sought to capture. Among the monks, there was one whose heart was a storm of desire. He mistook his longing for love, and in the secrecy of the night, he slipped her a letter, a desperate plea for a private union. Eshun did not hide the letter. She did not blush or whisper. The next day, before the entire assembly, she stood with the stillness of a deep lake. She looked directly at the monk, her gaze a sharp blade of truth, and invited him to embrace her right there, in the light of day, before the eyes of the world. The monk's face turned the color of blood, and his romantic fantasy crumbled into ash. He realized in that agonizing silence that his love was nothing but a ghost of his own ego, a desire to possess what he could not understand. True love does not hide in the dark. It is a fierce compassion that demands we see each other as we truly are, not as we wish to be. How many of your own relationships are built on the shifting sands of projection? We move further up the mountain to a hut that has stood for 20 years, supported by the hands of an old woman. She had fed a monk for 2 decades, believing she was nurturing a saint. But she wanted to know if the fire of life still burned within him, or if he had become a cold stone. She sent a young woman to embrace him, to test the warmth of his spirit. When the girl asked him what he felt, The monk replied with the chill of a winter grave, claiming he was like a cold tree on a frozen rock, devoid of all warmth. When the old woman heard this, her fury was a holy fire. She realized she had not been supporting a master, but a corpse who mistook indifference for enlightenment. She marched up the mountain and burned the hut to the ground, for a spirituality that cannot feel the warmth of a human touch is a hollow shell. Do not mistake your numbness for peace. The heart must remain soft, even if it is scarred, for a stone cannot grow, but a heart can bloom even in the ruins. Let the image of that burning hut stay with you as we turn to the story of Onami, the wrestler whose name meant great waves.
He was a titan in private, a force of nature that no man could move. But the moment he stepped before a crowd, the phantom of judgment paralyzed him. His strength turned to water, and his students threw him like a child. He sought out a master who told him to sit in the temple and become the waves. All night, Onami sat in the dark, imagining the tide rising within his veins. He felt the ocean crashing through the rafters, sweeping away the altars, drowning the very statues of the gods. By dawn, there was no Onami left, only the relentless, unyielding power of the deep sea. When he stepped into the ring that day, he did not see the spectators. He only felt the ebb and flow of the tide. He was unstoppable because he had ceased to exist as a man who could fail. He had become a force that simply was. What would you be if you stopped caring how the world saw you? If you became the wave instead of the person trying to stay afloat?
But the path is not always one of triumph. Sometimes it is a path of fire and regret, like the life of Shunkai. She was a woman of such terrifying intensity that the world did not know where to put her. She sought the divine with a hunger that burned, but the temple she called home turned its back on her, poisoned by the whispers of the jealous. In a moment of obsidian rage, she set the ancient wood of the temple ablaze, watching 500 years of history turn to smoke because she had been denied the gold of understanding. She spent 7 years in a cage of stone, and when she emerged, the world saw only a criminal. Yet, in her final hours, she found a peace that the priests who judged her would never know. She realized that the truth is like the sun and the moon. It cannot be hidden forever by the clouds of human judgment. Her story is a reminder that our shadows are part of our light, and that the most broken vessels are often the ones that hold the most grace. As you drift closer to the edge of sleep, consider the shepherd who sat upon a boulder, watching the clouds gather like a dark army on the horizon. A traveler asked him what the weather would be, and the shepherd replied with a smile that he would have exactly the kind of weather he liked. When asked how he could be so sure, he whispered that he had learned a secret more valuable than prophecy. Since he could not always get what he liked, he had learned to always like what he got. This is the art of the great acceptance, the ability to stop fighting the current and start flowing with the river of reality. We exhaust ourselves building dams against the inevitable, forgetting that the water always wins. Why not become the water? Think of the master sculptor who spent 40 years searching the world for the perfect block of marble to carve the ultimate Buddha. He traveled across oceans and climbed the highest peaks, looking for a stone that held the divine within its grain. Tired and broken, he returned to his village and spoke to a local priest. The priest did not point to a distant quarry. He pointed to the old stone well in the courtyard. When the sculptor looked down into the dark, still water, he didn't see a block of marble. He saw his own reflection, worn by time, lined with the history of his search. he realized that the Buddha he had been trying to carve out of stone had been the one doing the searching all along. The marble was his own life, and the chisel was every moment of awareness he had ever experienced. The search ends not when you find the object, but when you realize the seeker and the sought are made of the same light. You have been running through the dark, looking for a lamp, not realizing that you are the flame. But as the sculptor leaned closer to the dark water of the well, he realized that the face staring back at him held a secret that 40 years of searching had failed to uncover. It was the secret of the everyday mind, the realization that the divine is not a statue to be carved out of stone, but the very awareness that feels the weight of the chisel. We often wander through the world like beggars, unaware that we are sleeping on a chest of gold. We look for miracles in the clouds, while the miracle of our own heartbeat goes unnoticed. The sculptor finally understood that his life was not a preparation for a masterpiece. His life was the masterpiece. The Buddha he had sought in distant quarries was the same one who now stood by the well, breathing the cool evening air. When we stop trying to become something special, we finally have the space to be what we already are. In a village perched high in the mountains, where a swift river carved its way through ancient, jagged rocks, there lived an old man who understood this principle of being rather than becoming. The villagers often watched the river with a mixture of respect and fear, for the current was violent and unpredictable, especially where it surged toward a high waterfall that dropped into a rocky gorge. It was said that anything caught in those rapids was destined for destruction, broken against the stones that lay hidden beneath the churning white foam. One afternoon, a sudden storm broke over the peaks. The river swelled, turning into a muddy, raging torrent. The old man, caught by the rising waters while walking along the bank, lost his footing as the earth gave way. Before he could cry out, the current snatched him. Villagers standing on higher ground watched in horror as the old man was swept toward the edge of the waterfall. They saw his silver hair vanish into the mist as he plunged over the precipice. No human could survive such a fall. The force of the water alone was enough to crush bone, and the rocks below were like knives. They hurried to the base of the falls, expecting to find only fragments of a life lost to the river's fury. But as they reached the churning pool at the bottom, they saw a figure emerging from the spray. The old man walked calmly onto the shore, his movements as fluid as the water he had just escaped. He sat on a flat stone, wringing the moisture from his sleeves with a serene smile, as if he had merely stepped out of a gentle summer rain. When the bewildered villagers asked how he had survived the impossible, he spoke of a wisdom that few ever master. He told them that he had not survived by fighting the river, but by becoming it. When the water went down, he went down. When the water swirled, he swirled. He did not pit his strength against the torrent. He accommodated himself to the water, allowing its power to carry him rather than crush him. We exhaust ourselves trying to force the world to move according to our will, building dams of resistance against the inevitable changes of life. We treat every difficulty as a rock to be conquered, forgetting that the most enduring force in nature is not the stone, but the water that flows around it. This resistance often takes the form of a quiet, persistent poison, the habit of complaint. In a remote monastery, where the air was thick with the scent of pine and the sound of wooden bells, a young monk lived under a strict vow of silence. The rules were simple but demanding. For 10 years, not a single word was to be spoken. At the end of that decade, a monk was permitted to speak exactly 2 words to the head priest. It was a test of the heart, a way to see what remained when the noise of the world was stripped away. The young monk struggled. He found the floor too cold, the morning air too sharp, and the silence too heavy. He spent his days rehearsing the grievances that gathered in his mind like dust. When the first 10 years finally passed, he stood before the head monk. His heart was full of the bitterness he had nurtured in the dark. He looked the elder in the eye and said, "Bed hard." The head monk nodded slowly, offering no comfort and no judgment, and sent him back to his cell. Another 10 years of silence followed, but the monk did not use the quiet to find peace. He used it to sharpen his dissatisfaction, cataloguing every perceived slight and every physical discomfort. When the second decade ended, he returned to the hall and uttered his next 2 words: "Food stinks." Again, the head monk merely observed him with eyes that seemed to see the storm raging within the younger man's spirit. By the time the third decade came to a close, the monk's face was etched with the lines of a man who had lived in a prison of his own making. He had spent 30 years in a place of profound potential for awakening, yet he had only perfected the art of being miserable. He stood before the master for the last time and said, "I quit." The head monk sighed, a sound like wind through dead leaves, and replied that he was not surprised, for in 30 years, the monk had done nothing but complain. We often believe that our environment is the source of our suffering, thinking that if we could only change our bed, our food, or our companions, we would finally be at peace. But the monk carried his own thorns within him. Silence did not create his misery. It only revealed the noise of a mind that refused to accept what is. True peace is not found in the absence of difficulty, but in the presence of an unshakable center. Master Hakuin was a man who lived at that center. He was revered by all in his village as a paragon of purity and wisdom, until the day a local girl became pregnant. Fearing the wrath of her parents, she pointed a finger at the most respected man she knew, claiming Hakuin was the father. The village was transformed by a wave of righteous anger. The parents stormed to Hakuin's hut, hurling insults and accusations at the man they had once treated as a god. They expected him to beg for mercy or protest his innocence with the fire of a man wrongly accused. Instead, Hakuin looked at them with a gaze as steady as the mountain and asked, "Is that so?" When the child was born, the parents brought the infant to Hakuin and demanded he take responsibility for his sin. Without a word of defense, he took the baby into his arms. He lost his reputation, his students fled, and the villagers who once bowed to him now spat as he passed. For a year he cared for the child with the tenderness of a saint, begging for milk from the very people who despised him. He did not complain, nor did he try to clear his name. He simply met the reality of each moment with the same quiet acceptance. Eventually, the young mother could no longer bear the weight of her lie and confessed that the real father was a young man from the market. Her parents, overcome with shame, rushed back to Hakuin's humble home. They bowed until their foreheads touched the dirt, pleading for his forgiveness and asking for the child back. Hakuin did not gloat. He did not recount the hardships of the past year or demand that his reputation be restored. As he gently handed the baby back to the family, he offered the same 3 words that had carried him through the storm. Is that so? This is the power of a mind that has transcended the need for external validation. Hakuin understood that his worth was not something the village could give him, and therefore, it was not something the village could take away. He was like the deep ocean. The waves of scandal and praise moved across the surface, but the depths remained untouched, cold, and still. This fearlessness of spirit often looks like weakness to those who do not understand it. Consider the Zen master, Shichiri Kojun, who was sitting in his home one evening reciting sutras. The room was bathed in the soft, flickering light of a single candle when a thief burst through the door, a sharpened sword held high. The man demanded money, his voice shaking with the desperate energy of a predator. Shichiri did not flinch. He did not even look up from his book. He told the thief not to disturb his practice and pointed toward a drawer, telling him to help himself. The thief, stunned by this lack of resistance, began to stuff his pockets with coins. As the thief turned to leave, Shichiri's voice cut through the silence once more. He asked the man to leave a little money behind, for he had taxes to pay the following morning. The thief, moving like a man in a dream, obeyed. As he reached the threshold of the door, Shichiri called out a final time, reminding the man that when one receives a gift, it is only polite to say thank you. The thief muttered a confused thanks and vanished into the darkness. When the man was later caught and the authorities brought him before Shichiri to testify, the master refused to play the role of the victim. He told the court that he had given the man the money freely and that the man had even thanked him for it. The thief was sentenced to prison for other crimes, but the memory of that encounter stayed with him like a burning coal. He had spent his life fighting a world that fought him back, but in Shichiri, he had encountered a force that refused to fight at all. He realized that the master was not afraid of losing his money because he was not attached to possessing it. Upon his release, the former thief went straight to Shichiri's door, not to steal, but to serve. He became a student of the man who had treated him with more dignity during a robbery than the world had ever shown him in kindness. We spend so much of our lives building walls of defense, convinced that our safety lies in our ability to protect what is ours. But Shichiri showed that the only things we truly possess are the ones we are willing to give away. This brings us to the realization that the labels we place on things, good and bad, sacred and profane, thief and master, are often the very veils that prevent us from seeing the truth. An emperor once asked a great master what the highest truth of the holy doctrine was, expecting a complex explanation of the heavens and the laws of karma. The master replied that there was only vast emptiness and not a trace of holiness. The emperor, confused and perhaps a bit insulted, asked who it was that stood before him then, if nothing was sacred. The master's answer was a mirror held up to the emperor's own seeking mind. "I do not know." In that moment, the master stripped away the comfort of certainty, leaving the emperor to face the silence that exists before a single thought is born. This silence is not a void, but a vast field of possibility, much like the open sky that a humble shepherd watched as he sat upon a dusty mountain road. On this particular morning, as the sun climbed steadily, casting long shadows across the wild grasses, a weary traveler approached the shepherd. The traveler looked toward the horizon, where heavy, dark clouds were beginning to gather in an uncertain dance with the clear blue. He was a man who liked his plans orderly and his paths predictable, and the shifting sky filled him with a restless anxiety. He wiped the sweat from his brow and called out to the shepherd, asking what kind of weather the day would bring. The shepherd, whose face was a map of seasons lived under the open firmament, smiled with a clarity that seemed to mirror the mountain streams. He replied simply that it would be the kind of weather he liked. The traveler was taken aback by such an illogical answer. He pressed for a forecast, a certainty he could carry with him, but the shepherd only gestured toward the vast, unfolding sky. He explained that he had long ago discovered a secret that many spend their entire lives missing. Since he could not always get what he liked, he had learned to always like what he got. In that moment, the traveler realized he was standing before a man who had achieved a victory greater than any king. He was free from from the tyranny of expectation. We often exhaust ourselves trying to force the world to conform to our desires, building our happiness on the fragile hope that circumstances will remain favorable. But true contentment is not found in the arrangement of the clouds. It is found in the heart that recognizes that whether it rains or shines, the sky remains the sky. This shift in perspective is the same realization that eluded a master sculptor for nearly half a century.
Imagine a man who had spent 40 years in a bustling stone quarry, his lungs filled with the fine dust of marble and his hands calloused by the weight of the chisel. He was a man of extraordinary gift, able to look at a raw, jagged block of stone and sense the suchness within it. He would run his weathered fingers over a cold surface and whisper that a hero was locked inside, or a saint was waiting to be released. His reputation was built on this ability to see the soul of the stone, yet his own soul remained restless. He was searching for the perfect block, the one slab of marble in all the world that would allow him to carve his masterwork, a statue of the Buddha that would capture the very essence of enlightenment. He traveled to the furthest reaches of the earth, consulted the most renowned experts, and hired specialists to scour remote mountain ranges.
He grew old in this search, his energies waning, and still, the elusive Buddha block remained hidden. Finally, burdened by the weight of his incomplete life's work, he visited a small Zen temple at the end of his street. He bowed deeply before the priest and confessed his failure. The priest, a man of quiet moss and still waters, listened with eyes that seemed to hold no judgment at all. When the sculptor finished his story, the priest smiled and told him there was no problem. He pointed across the peaceful courtyard to a stone well surrounded by carefully tended greenery. He told the sculptor that the material he sought was right there. The sculptor hurried to the well, his heart pounding with a hope he hadn't felt in decades. He leaned over the edge and peered down into the dark, still water. But he didn't see a block of marble. He saw himself. He saw the lined face marked by years of searching, the questioning eyes, and the silver hair of a man who had looked everywhere except where he was. Buddha's wisdom reminds us that if we cannot find the truth right where we are, it is unlikely we will find it anywhere else. We exhaust ourselves searching in distant places and perfect circumstances, forgetting that the very consciousness doing the seeking is the material of awakening. We postpone our peace, telling ourselves we will be happy when we get the promotion, when we find the right partner, or when the conditions are finally perfect. But the sculptor's realization was that he didn't need to become something different. He needed to recognize what he already was. The artist, the art, and the awareness that appreciates beauty are all expressions of the same essential nature. This lesson of non-resistance and recognition flows naturally into the tale of an old man and a violent waterfall. In a village where a swift river carved its way through ancient, jagged rocks, there lived a sage who spent his days observing the interplay between the water and the stone. One afternoon, a sudden storm turned the river into a raging torrent. The current grew unpredictable, rushing toward a high waterfall that plunged into a rocky, chaotic gorge below. The bank gave way beneath the old man's feet, and before he could catch his breath, he was swept into the churning water. Villagers watched in horror as he was carried toward the edge, certain that no one could survive the plunge onto the rocks at the bottom. They rushed to the base of the falls, expecting to find a broken body, but to their amazement, they saw the old man emerging from the foam completely unharmed. He walked to the shore as calmly as if he had just finished a refreshing bath and sat down to wring the water from his sleeves. When the bewildered villagers asked how he had survived such a terrifying fall, he explained that he simply accommodated himself to the water. He did not fight the current.
he allowed himself to be shaped by it. When the water went down, he went down. When it swirled, he swirled. He became like the water itself. We often fight against the difficult circumstances of our lives with a frantic energy that only creates more suffering. We believe that through sheer force of will, we can redirect the river. But the old man's survival was the result of understanding that alignment is more powerful than resistance. This does not mean passive submission, but a conscious adaptation that maintains our center while flowing with the forces we cannot change.
We exhaust ourselves trying to control other people or force outcomes. But true strength is like water, fluid, soft and yielding, yet capable of wearing away the hardest rock. In contrast to the old man who flowed with the river, there was a monk in a remote mountain monastery who spent 30 years building a dam of dissatisfaction. This monastery was a place of profound silence, where monks spoke only 2 words every 10 years to the head monk. One young man entered with high hopes, but he immediately began to notice everything that was wrong. After his first decade of silence, he approached the master and said his 2 words, "Bed hard." The master nodded and said nothing. Another 10 years passed, years in which the monk's mind became a theater of grievances. When his next opportunity to speak arrived, he declared, "Food stinks." Again, the master showed no judgment. By the end of the 3rd decade, the monk's negativity had consumed him. He appeared before the head monk, his face twisted with a bitterness that 30 years of meditation had failed to touch. He spoke his final 2 words, "I quit." The head monk looked at him with a mixture of sadness and understanding, and replied that he wasn't surprised, for all the monk had ever done was complain. This monk had used 30 years of sacred silence to perfect the art of internal criticism. He had brought his habitual mental patterns into the monastery and blamed the walls for the coldness in his own heart. We often believe our suffering is caused by our environment, but as the Buddha taught, we are what we think. With our thoughts, we make the world. This monk had reinforced the very patterns that caused his misery, proving that even in a place of peace, a restless mind will find a way to build a prison. This brings us to the story of Master Hakuin, a man whose peace was so deeply rooted that not even the most stinging public scandal could disturb it. Hakuin lived in a small village where he was revered as a saint, a man of impeccable character and profound wisdom. However, in that same village, a young woman from a respected family became pregnant. Her parents were furious, demanding to know the name of the father. In a moment of sheer panic, the girl pointed to the one person she believed could weather the storm better than her actual lover. She accused Master Hakuin. When the parents confronted the master with this shocking accusation, the villagers gathered, ready to witness a great fall from grace. They expected him to protest, to argue, or to show some sign of the outrage an innocent man should feel. But Hakuin simply listened to their insults and replied with 3 quiet words. "Is that so?" His reputation, built over decades, vanished in a single afternoon. He was treated as a hypocrite and the pariah, yet his expression remained as calm as the surface of a deep lake. When the child was born, the parents brought the infant to his door and told him it was his responsibility. They expected him to be burdened by the shame, but he simply took the child into his arms and said once more, "Is that so?" For a full year, the master cared for the baby with a tenderness that moved even his harshest critics. He begged for milk from the neighbors who whispered behind his back, and he walked the floors at night with the child, his equanimity unbroken by the loss of his status. Eventually, the young woman could no longer live with the weight of her lie. She confessed that the real father was a young man from the local market. Her parents, filled with a crushing remorse, rushed to Hakuin's house to beg for his forgiveness. They explained the truth and asked to take the child back to its rightful family.
As he gently handed the baby over, Hakuin looked at them with the same peaceful gaze he had held throughout the entire ordeal and said, for the final time, "Is that so?" Hakuin's power lay in his refusal to let the world's opinion define his inner reality. He understood that his worth was not something that could be given or taken away by the whispers of a village. Whether he was being hailed as a saint or cursed as a sinner, he remained the same. Most of us spend our lives chasing praise and fleeing from blame, our happiness rising and falling with every external judgment. But Hakuin demonstrated a freedom that is available to us all. The freedom to remain centered in our own truth, regardless of the storms that howl outside our door. He did not need to defend himself because he was not attached to the image of himself. He was the vast emptiness the emperor had been told about, a space so large that even the greatest scandal could not fill it. This same theme of internal truth and external pressure is found in the life of Shunkai, a woman whose journey was a tempest of passion and seeking. She was a woman of extraordinary beauty and an even more extraordinary spiritual hunger. But she lived in a time that had no place for a woman of such intensity. Forced into a marriage she did not want, her life became a rebellion against the walls that tried to contain her. She sought refuge in philosophy and then in Zen, but even in the temples, her presence was a disruption. The monks, who were supposed to be transcending desire, found themselves ensnared by her magnetic grace. She was eventually expelled from her spiritual home due to the jealous gossip of a priest's wife, a rejection that ignited a fire within her. In a moment of blinding fury, she burned the ancient temple to the ground, an act that led her to 7 years in prison. Yet even in the darkness of a cell, her spirit remained a flame that could not be extinguished. When she was finally released, she found herself a pariah, shunned by the very community that preached universal compassion. She lived her final years in poverty and sickness, yet she discovered a simple, profound peace through a practice of pure love that needed no temple walls. Her story is a haunting reminder that the path to awakening is often messy and unconventional, and that our capacity to hold space for the struggles of others is the true measure of our spiritual maturity. She was a vessel that had been broken by the world, yet in her brokenness, she found a light that the polished and the perfect often miss.
It is easy to be peaceful when the world is kind, but the true test of our practice is how we respond when the banks give way and we are swept into the torrent. Like the old man in the waterfall, we must learn to move with the whirlpools of our lives, maintaining our intention while letting go of our resistance. We must learn to look into the well of our own reflection and realize that the Buddha we have been searching for across 40 years of quarries is the one who is looking back. As we move deeper into the quiet of this night, consider the salt of your own life, the pains, the disappointments, and the unexpected turns. Will you be the small glass that is turned bitter by a single handful, or will you find the courage to expand your heart until it becomes a lake, vast enough to hold everything with grace? In the village where Shunkai once walked, there was a young woman who found herself caught in a different kind of storm. And in her desperation, she pointed to the one person who stood as a pillar of silence amidst the noise. The parents of that young woman did not see a pillar of silence. They saw a predator hiding behind a mask of holiness. They stormed into Master Hakuin's humble hut, their faces contorted with a mixture of grief and righteous fury. They had spent their lives bowing to this man, offering him their respect and their food, believing him to be a saint who had transcended the messy desires of the world. Now, their daughter's accusation had shattered that image, leaving them feeling betrayed and foolish. They unleashed a torrent of bitter words, shouting their accusations and demanding an explanation for the shame he had supposedly brought upon their house. They expected protests of innocence, frantic explanations, or at the very least, a flicker of shock on his face. But Hakuin simply sat there, his back straight, his eyes as calm as the surface of a deep well at midnight. When the storm of their anger finally paused, he looked at them with a gaze that held no judgment and simply asked, "Is that so?" To the parents, this lack of defense was a clear admission of guilt. Why else would a man remain silent in the face of such a monstrous lie, unless he had no truth to offer? The news rippled through the village like a poison, turning the once revered master into a pariah overnight. Students who had traveled miles to hear his words now burned their notes and spat toward his dwelling. The very people who had once sought his blessing now whispered that he was a hypocrite who had been living a double life. His reputation, built over decades of disciplined practice and selfless service, vanished in the time it takes for a candle to be blown out. Yet Hakuin did not close his doors or flee into the mountains. He remained exactly where he was, moving with the same slow, deliberate grace, even as the village turned its back on him. When the child was born, the parents' resentment reached a boiling point. They did not want the living reminder of their daughter's shame in their house, so they carried the crying infant directly to Hakuin's door. They thrust the tiny, helpless bundle into the master's arms, declaring bitterly that since he was the father, the responsibility was now his. They walked away, leaving him alone with a life he had not fathered and a burden he had not earned. And once again, looking down at the small, wrinkled face of the child, Hakuin offered the same unfathomable response. "Is that so?" He did not call for the village elders to witness this injustice. He did not seek out the young woman to demand she tell the truth. He simply accepted the child. For many months, the former master, now a social outcast, dedicated his life to the care of the infant. He was seen begging for milk from the very neighbors who mocked him. He spent his nights walking the floors of his hut, shushing the baby's cries, and his days washing diapers in the cold stream. He provided all the tender attention and devotion that any loving parent would give. His heart as open to the child as it had once been to the sacred texts. He had lost his status, his livelihood, and the respect of his peers. Yet he continued to care for the child with a peaceful dedication that defied human logic. He was a man who had lost everything the world deems valuable, yet he seemed to lack nothing. The weight of a lie, however, is a heavy thing to carry, especially when it is laid upon the shoulders of a man who meets it with nothing but kindness. The young woman watched from a distance as the revered teacher suffered for her deception, seeing him beg for the child's milk and endure the village's contempt without a single word of complaint. The guilt began to eat at her, a silent shadow that followed her through every room and haunted her every dream. She saw the master's quiet dignity as he carried the child, and it became a mirror she could no longer bear to look into. Finally, her spirit broke. She confessed the truth to her parents, revealing that the real father was a young man from the village fish market, whom she had been trying to protect. Her parents were paralyzed with horror. They realized they had spent a year persecuting an innocent man, a man they had once called a saint, and had forced him to raise a child that was not his own. They rushed to Hakuin's simple dwelling, falling to their knees and bowing their heads until they touched the dirt, offering profuse apologies and begging for his forgiveness. They explained their daughter's confession and asked to take the child back to its true family. Hakuin listened to their frantic, tearful apologies with the same equanimity he had shown to their original accusations. As he gently placed the baby back into their arms, he offered the same 3 words that had carried him through the entire ordeal. "Is that so?" In that final response, Hakuin revealed the profound power of a mind that is no longer tethered to the validation of the world. Why do we allow the opinions of others to dictate our inner weather? We spend so much of our lives trying to defend our reputations, to prove our innocence, and to ensure that everyone sees us as we wish to be seen. But Hakuin knew that the truth does not need a defense. His sense of worth did not come from the villagers' praise, so it could not be taken away by their blame. He was not being passive, he was demonstrating the ultimate form of spiritual freedom, the ability to remain centered and compassionate regardless of whether the world honors you or dishonors you. He showed that our inner peace is not a hostage to external circumstances unless we choose to give up the keys. This same quality of fearless peace was demonstrated by another master, Shichiri Kojin, on an evening when the very air seemed to hold its breath. Shichiri sat in his quiet home, the soft glow of a single candle dancing against the walls as he recited the ancient sutras. His voice was a low, rhythmic hum, a sound that seemed to weave itself into the silence of the room. Suddenly, the front door was kicked open with a violent crash. A man burst in, his eyes wide with a desperate, jagged energy. He held a sharp sword that caught the candlelight, its blade a cold sliver of silver in the dim room. "Money or your life," the thief demanded, his voice shaking with a mixture of fear and aggression. He expected the old monk to cower, to plead for his life, to scramble frantically for whatever coins he might have hidden away. But Shichiri did not even look up from his book. His voice remained steady, the sacred words of the sutra continuing to flow into the room as if nothing unusual had occurred. After a few moments, he paused and addressed the intruder with the same gentle tone he might use to ask a neighbor to close a door. "Please do not disturb my practice," he said softly. "If you need money, help yourself. It is in that drawer over there." He gestured casually toward the simple wooden chest and then immediately returned to his recitation. The thief stood frozen, his sword still raised, his mind reeling in confusion. In all his years of crime, he had never encountered a reaction like this. There was no fear, no anger, just a matter-of-fact helpfulness that made his violence feel absurd and out of place. Shaking his head to clear the bewilderment, the thief moved to the drawer and began gathering the coins he found there. The soft, rhythmic sound of the master's voice continued behind him, reciting the sacred texts as peacefully as if the room were empty. Just as the thief was preparing to slip back into the night with his stolen goods, the master's voice called out again. "Wait," Shichiri said, looking up from his book for the first time. "Please do not take everything. I have taxes to pay tomorrow, and I will need some of that money for the officials. Leave a little for me, won't you?" The thief, acting almost without thinking, reached into his sack and returned some of the coins to the drawer. He turned to leave, certain that this strange encounter was finally over. But the master's voice stopped him once more. "You have taken my money," Shichiri called out, his tone carrying a note of gentle reproach. "And yet you have not even thanked me. That is quite rude, don't you think?" This final comment left the thief completely speechless. His sword hand began to tremble, not with anger, but with a profound sense of being unnerved. He was facing a man who treated a robbery as if it were a favor, a man who was more concerned with the thief's manners than his own safety. Thank you," the thief stammered, and then he fled into the darkness as quickly as his legs would carry him. Later, when the thief was caught and confessed to a string of crimes, including the robbery at the monastery, Shichiri was called as a witness. The court expected him to demand justice, to describe the terror of being threatened with a sword. Instead, Shichiri spoke with a calm clarity that silenced the room. "This man did not steal anything from me," he testified. "I gave him the money freely. He even thanked me for it, though I had to remind him of his manners." The thief, sitting in his heavy chains, felt something break open in his chest as he heard those words. This man had not only shown him kindness in the moment of the crime, but was now protecting him from the consequences. For the first time in his life, the thief wept, not out of self-pity, but out of a sudden, overwhelming recognition of a love that asked for nothing in return. Upon his release from prison, the former thief sought out the master and begged to become his student. Under Shichiri's patient guidance, he learned to cultivate the same fearless compassion he had witnessed that night. Years later, through dedicated practice and the master's unwavering belief in his potential for transformation, he attained the deep peace and wisdom of enlightenment. It is a story that reveals the revolutionary power of meeting violence with absolute peace and answering fear with love. Why do we instinctively believe that force must be met with force? Zen Buddhism teaches that when we respond to hostility with hostility, we simply feed the cycle of suffering. But when we respond with genuine compassion, not a passive submission, but an active, fearless love, we create a space for transformation that the sword can never reach. This mastery of the self is far more difficult than the mastery of any external skill, a truth that even the most powerful rulers have had to learn. In ancient China, there was an emperor who was known throughout the land for his devotion to the Buddhist path. Unlike other rulers who focused only on conquest and wealth, this emperor had spent years studying sacred texts, building thousands of temples, and supporting monasteries. He believed he had a deep understanding of the highest truths. When word reached him of a great Zen master, whose wisdom was said to transcend all conventional knowledge, the emperor invited him to the palace. He was eager to test his own sophisticated grasp of doctrine against the master's renowned insight. The day of the meeting, the palace was filled with anticipation. The emperor sat on his golden throne, surrounded by the opulence of his court, and prepared to impress the master with his devotion. When the master finally entered, he appeared utterly ordinary, his robes simple and worn from travel. The emperor began by listing his many accomplishments, his voice echoing through the vast hall. "Venerable master," he said, "I have built temples, supported thousands of monks, and devoted my life to the sacred path. Now I ask you, what is the highest truth of the holy Buddhist doctrine?" He leaned forward, expecting a profound discourse that would confirm his years of study. Instead, the master looked him in the eye and said quietly, "Vast emptiness, and not a trace of holiness." The emperor was stunned. He had built his entire identity around being a holy ruler, and this master had just dissolved that foundation with a single sentence. "If there is no holiness," the emperor asked, his voice betraying his confusion and dismay, "then who or what are you? If there is no sacred truth to attain, what makes you a master?" The emperor's questions carried the weight of years spent accumulating spiritual knowledge as if it were gold. The master's response was even simpler than the first. "I do not know," he said. And then he turned and departed as quietly as he had arrived, leaving the emperor in a silence that was deeper than any he had ever known. True wisdom begins not with the accumulation of knowledge, but with the recognition of the limitations of the mind. The emperor had confused spiritual materialism with genuine awakening, believing that the more he knew, the closer he was to the truth. But the master's "I do not know" was not a statement of ignorance.
It was the wisdom of the beginner's mind, a state of open, fresh perception that is not filtered through the ego's need to be right. It is a reminder that the truth cannot be possessed or described in conventional terms. It is the vast emptiness that contains all things, a reality that is always present but hidden by our labels and definitions. This lesson of self-mastery is one that even the most skilled among us must eventually face. Much like a young man who had devoted his life to the art of the bow and arrow, he had practiced until his aim was perfect, winning every contest until his pride grew as large as his reputation. Determined to seek out the ultimate challenge, the young archer climbed high into the mist-shrouded peaks, his heart set on defeating the old Zen master, whose skill was said to be not of this world. He found the master's simple dwelling and issued his challenge with the boldness of one who has never known defeat. "Old man," he said, standing tall with his finely crafted bow, "I have heard of your reputation. I challenge you to a demonstration to see if your skill can truly match mine." The master, whose ancient eyes seemed to hold the quiet amusement of a mountain stream, simply nodded his acceptance. Without wasting a moment, the young archer set up a target at a formidable distance. He drew his bow with practiced precision, his muscles rippling with controlled power, and let loose. The arrow flew straight and true, striking the exact center of the bullseye with a satisfying thud. Before the vibration had even left the target, he notched a second arrow, aimed, and fired. This second arrow split the first one down its center, a feat of such technical brilliance that few in the world could ever hope to replicate it. The young man turned to the master, his chest puffed with pride and his eyes gleaming with the fire of victory. "There," he said, gesturing toward the shattered remains of his first arrow. "Let us see if you can match that display of skill." The old master looked at the target, then at the young man, and smiled with a gentleness that was almost unnerving. But instead of drawing his own bow, he simply motioned for the archer to follow him. "Come," he said quietly, his voice a mere whisper against the mountain wind. "Let us find a place more suitable for a true demonstration of mastery." Curious and entirely confident that no environment could diminish his superior abilities, the young archer followed the master up a winding, treacherous path. They climbed higher and higher, where the air grew thin and the silence of the peaks felt heavy, until they reached a place where the mountain was split by a deep, terrifying chasm. Spanning this bottomless gap was a single fallen log, weathered, narrow, and slick with the dampness of the clouds. It served as the only bridge between the two sides of the abyss. Far below, the bottom disappeared into a hungry shadow that seemed to wait for the slightest error. Without a word, the old master stepped out onto this precarious bridge. His movements were unhurried, graceful, and completely at ease, as if he were walking on a wide garden path rather than a slippery log over certain death. When he reached the center where the log sagged and swayed under his weight, he paused. He turned to face a distant tree on the far side of the chasm. Drawing his bow with the same casual precision he might use in his own courtyard, the master took aim and released. The arrow flew across the void and struck the distant tree with a clean, direct hit. It was not necessarily more accurate than the young man's shots, but it was accomplished under conditions that would paralyze even the most seasoned warrior. The master then gracefully stepped back onto solid ground and gestured toward the log. "Now," he said simply, "it is your turn." The young archer approached the edge of the chasm and looked down. The abyss seemed to pull at him, a yawning mouth of darkness that made his head swim. His mouth went dry, his palms began to sweat, and his legs trembled so violently that he could barely stand. The very thought of stepping onto that narrow, unstable log filled him with a primal, paralyzing terror.
All the technical skill that had made him so arrogant suddenly felt irrelevant. He tried to force himself forward, but his body refused to obey. His hands shook so much that he couldn't even grip his bow properly, much less aim with any precision. The steady breathing and focused concentration that had served him so well in the safety of the training grounds had completely abandoned him. He was no longer a master. He was a terrified boy, facing the reality of his own fragility. The master watched this struggle not with judgment, but with a compassionate understanding that cut deeper than any insult. "You have developed great skill with your bow," he observed gently. "But you have little skill with the mind that lets loose the shot." This ancient wisdom illuminates the profound difference between mastery of technique and mastery of the self. Why is it that we so often mistake technical proficiency for true greatness? In our modern world, we perfect our skills in controlled environments, believing ourselves to be experts, only to discover our limitations the moment we face genuine uncertainty, danger, or challenge. The young archer had achieved remarkable technical skill, but only under ideal conditions. When his environment changed, when fear entered the equation, his carefully cultivated abilities disappeared entirely. His mastery was revealed to be shallow, dependent on external safety rather than inner stability. Consider your own areas of expertise. How does your competence hold up when the stakes are raised? When faced with unfamiliar circumstances or emotional pressure, do your skills remain intact, or do they crumble like the young archer's confidence on the bridge? In Zen practice, we cultivate what is known as unshakable presence, the ability to remain centered and effective regardless of external conditions. This doesn't mean the elimination of fear, but the development of an inner stability that allows us to function skillfully even when the log beneath us begins to sway. The master's demonstration was never about the arrow. It was about revealing the gap between a skill that depends on perfect conditions and a mastery that emerges from genuine equanimity. As the Buddha taught, the mind is everything. What you think, you become. If the mind is filled with the abyss, the arrow will fall. If the mind is as vast as the sky, the chasm ceases to exist. This same weight of the mind, this profound responsibility we carry in every moment, is reflected in the story of a clever young student who sought to outsmart his teacher. He had grown tired of the master's seemingly wise responses and was convinced the old man was merely a fraud speaking in riddles. He decided to devise a trap that would expose this pretense once and for all. One morning, the student caught a small sparrow in the garden. The tiny bird trembled in his cupped hands, its heart beating rapidly against his palms, a frantic thrumming of life. He held it carefully behind his back as he approached his teacher, who was sitting peacefully in the morning sunlight. "Master," the student called out with a mischievous glint in his eye, "I have a question to test your legendary wisdom. Tell me, the bird I hold in my hands, is it alive or is it dead?" The young man felt incredibly clever. He had created what he believed was an impossible dilemma. If the master answered alive, he would quickly snap the bird's neck and reveal a dead creature. If the master answered dead, he would simply open his hands and let the living bird fly away. Either way, the teacher would be proven wrong, and his supposed wisdom would be revealed as nothing more than lucky guessing. He waited eagerly, his muscles tensed, ready to deliver the final blow to the master's reputation. The teacher sat quietly for a long moment, his eyes looking not at the student's face, but through him, as if perceiving the very intentions hidden in the young man's heart. Finally, with a smile that held both compassion and a deep, piercing truth,
The master spoke. "The answer, my young friend, is in your hands." The student stood frozen, his mouth hanging open.
In those 6 simple words, his elaborate trap had been completely dismantled. The teacher hadn't fallen for the false choice. Instead, he had pointed to the fundamental truth that the student himself held the power to determine the outcome. The bird's fate had never depended on the teacher's wisdom. It had always been entirely in the student's control. In that moment of clarity, the young man realized that this was true about far more than just the sparrow. The power to choose life or death, creation or destruction, compassion or cruelty, all of it was always in his hands, in every situation, every single day. Slowly, he brought his hands forward and opened them. The small bird sat still for a heartbeat, then spread its wings and flew into the blue sky, disappearing into the freedom of the trees. We often look outside ourselves for answers that can only be found within, seeking authority figures to tell us what to do or what to think. But the deepest teaching of Zen is that true wisdom cannot be given. It can only be discovered through our own conscious engagement with life. The student's question seemed to be about the teacher's insight, but it was actually a mirror reflecting his own power and the responsibility that comes with it. Every moment of our lives presents us with choices that shape not only our immediate circumstances, but our very character. The bird in our hands represents everything precious we hold: the well-being of others, our own integrity, and the opportunities for growth. The outcome depends not on the world's wisdom, but on what we choose to do with the power we possess. This responsibility can feel like a heavy burden, much like the weight felt by the creatures living at the bottom of a great crystal river. In this river, where the water flowed clear as mountain air, lived an entire village of small beings. For generations, their way of survival had been to grasp tightly to the stones, branches, and roots on the riverbed. "Hold on," the elders would warn the young ones from the moment they were born. "The current is dangerous. It will sweep you away to places unknown and batter you against the rocks. Safety lies in staying exactly where you are." And so, they spent their lives in a state of constant tension, their appendages weary from the endless effort of clinging to the familiar, terrified of the very water that gave them life. But one small creature grew tired of this exhausting struggle. Day after day, he watched the current flow overhead with such purpose and grace, and he began to wonder what it might feel like to trust that movement. "I am tired of clinging," he announced to his neighbors one morning. "Though I cannot see where it leads, I trust that the current knows its destination. I shall let go and allow it to carry me where it will." The others gasped in horror, calling him a fool and predicting his certain destruction. But the creature had made his decision. He released his grip on the familiar stone. Immediately, the current seized him, and just as the others had predicted, he was tumbled and tossed across the rocky bottom. The pain was intense as he struck stone after stone, his body battered by the very force he had chosen to trust. Yet, as he continued to surrender, refusing to grab for new anchors despite the pain, something remarkable began to happen. The water gradually lifted him higher, away from the dangerous, jagged bottom. The tumbling ceased. He was no longer fighting the direction of the river. He was becoming one with its movement. As he traveled downstream, creatures in distant parts of the river witnessed a sight they had never seen. One of their own kind appearing to fly through the water with elegant power. "See? A miracle!" they cried out in awe. "A savior has come to show us the way." The flowing creature felt compassion for their misunderstanding and called back, "I am no savior. The river delights in lifting us all free, if only we dare to let go." Our true work is not clinging to the bottom, but embracing this grand adventure of trust. But the creatures only cried louder, bowing to him as a messiah, while simultaneously tightening their own grips on the rocks and roots. They preferred to weave legends about a miraculous savior rather than face the terrifying freedom of letting go themselves. They watched him disappear around a bend, returning to their weary, safe existence, convinced that his journey was a divine exception rather than a universal possibility. We spend our lives grasping for security, believing that our safety depends on holding tight to familiar circumstances. Yet, it is in this very grasping that we create the suffering we seek to avoid. The current of change will flow whether we resist it or not, and our only real choice is whether to exhaust ourselves in futile opposition or to discover the grace that is available only in surrender. This movement of life is constant, and when we resist this truth, we put ourselves in opposition to reality itself. Think of the areas in your life where you are still clinging to the rocks, perhaps a relationship that has grown cold, a career that no longer nourishes you, or an image of yourself that has become a cage. The fear of the unknown keeps your hands clenched, even as your spirit grows weary of the tension. The river offers to carry you toward unknown adventures, but it requires the one thing the ego fears most: the release of control. True mastery, as the archer learned and the river creature discovered, is not found in the safety of solid ground or the perfection of a controlled shot, but in the ability to remain centered while walking through the void. It is the recognition that the power to choose and the courage to let go are two sides of the same coin, held firmly in the palm of your hand. Consider the weight of the truths you carry. Are they wings that help you fly, or are they anchors that keep you tethered to a fading shore? In the silence of the high mountains, a renowned Zen master had gained a reputation for a single, profound insight that he shared with absolute conviction. Buddha is your own mind, he would tell his students, his voice echoing with the clarity of a temple bell. Stop looking outside yourself for what you already possess. Stop seeking in temples and books what is already present in your own consciousness. Realize this, and you will be free. Among his many followers, one young monk was so deeply moved by this teaching that it seemed to illuminate every dark corner of his soul. The idea that enlightenment was not a distant prize to be won, but the very nature of his own awareness, struck him as the most revolutionary truth he had ever encountered. This insight felt so complete that he decided it deserved his total, undivided dedication. Leaving the monastery and his fellow students behind, the monk retreated deep into the wilderness. He found a remote cave, a jagged opening in the rock surrounded by nothing but the ancient whispers of the forest, where he could practice without any distractions from the outside world. There, in that solitary sanctuary, he spent 20 years in contemplation. He probed every syllable of the master's words, examining his own consciousness from every possible angle. He watched his thoughts arise and dissolve, always returning to the central pillar of his faith. Buddha is your own mind. The years passed in a blur of seasons, the biting cold of winter, the humid breath of summer, as he sought to embody this understanding completely. He became a hermit of the mind, a man who had turned a single sentence into a universe. One day, a traveling monk happened to pass through the dense woods near the cave. The hermit, exhilarated to meet another practitioner after 2 decades of silence, emerged from his retreat to greet the visitor. As they sat together, sharing the simple warmth of the mountain air, the hermit learned that this traveler had also studied under the same renowned master. "How wonderful to meet a fellow student," the hermit exclaimed, his eyes bright with a fire that had burned for 20 years. "Please, tell me what you know of our master's greatest teaching." I have spent my life contemplating his profound insight that Buddha is your own mind." The traveling monk's expression shifted, his eyes lighting up with recognition. But his response was entirely unexpected. "Ah, yes," the traveler said enthusiastically. "The master has indeed been very clear about this subject. His greatest teaching, the one he emphasizes above all others now, is this: Buddha is not your own mind." The hermit stood speechless, feeling as though the very mountain beneath his feet had dissolved into mist. After 20 years of dedicated practice based on what he believed was the ultimate truth, he was now hearing the exact opposite presented with equal conviction. It was a moment of profound disorientation, a collapse of the conceptual world he had built so carefully. As the Buddha taught, the finger pointing at the moon is not the moon itself. Here, in the hermit's shock, we discover that even the most profound teachings are simply tools for awakening, not ultimate truths to be grasped and defended like a fortress. Why do we cling so tightly to particular formulations of truth? Zen Buddhism reveals that our attachment to specific teachings, no matter how holy they may seem, can become the very obstacles that prevent the understanding they were meant to inspire. The hermit's confusion points to a fundamental aspect of Zen instruction. Masters often use contradictory teachings to prevent the mind from turning insights into rigid, lifeless beliefs. The purpose is not to provide a final, comfortable answer, but to exhaust the mind's tendency to grasp and conceptualize, creating a vast, open space for direct realization that exists beyond all words and ideas. Both teachings, Buddha is your mind and Buddha is not your mind, serve a vital function. For someone lost in external seeking, the first redirects the attention inward. For someone attached to the egoic idea of possessing Buddha nature, the second dissolves that subtle grasping. In your own life, how often do you turn helpful pointers into absolute dogmas that must be defended? The hermit's 20-year retreat, while sincere, demonstrates how even a correct understanding can become a form of limitation when it is held too rigidly. In Zen, we learn to hold all teachings lightly, like medicine that serves its purpose and is then set aside. The master's apparent contradiction was not inconsistency, but skillful means, using whatever approach would most effectively dissolve the specific form of confusion present in the student. This tendency to cling to the form while forgetting the function leads us to another corner of the monastery, where a different kind of ritual had taken root. This is the lesson of the monastery cat and the scholars who forgot. In a peaceful temple nestled in the peaks, a community of monks dedicated themselves to the rigors of evening meditation. Every day, as the sun dipped behind the jagged horizon and shadows stretched long across the temple grounds, they would gather in the hall for their most important session. However, the monastery was also home to a particularly vocal cat. This cat had developed the unfortunate habit of appearing during the deepest moments of silence, meowing loudly, knocking over water bowls, and creating a general disturbance that tested the monks' patience. Night after night, the monks would attempt to settle into stillness, only to be interrupted by the cat's unpredictable antics. Finally, the spiritual teacher decided that a practical solution was needed. He instructed his students to gently capture the cat before each meditation session and tie it securely in a corner of the hall where it could do no harm. This simple, practical measure proved effective. The cat was present, but it could no longer disturb the monks' concentration. Years passed, and this arrangement became a part of the daily rhythm. When the old teacher eventually died, the monks naturally continued the practice he had established, including the evening tying of the cat. They didn't question why it was done. It had simply become an integral part of their tradition. In time, the original cat also died. The
The monks, now thoroughly convinced that having a tied cat was essential to proper meditation, went to great lengths to acquire another cat, specifically for this purpose. Generations came and went, and the practice persisted. Centuries later, learned descendants of the original teacher wrote scholarly treatises about the deep religious significance of tying up a cat during meditation. They developed elaborate, beautiful theories about the symbolic meaning of the restrained animal, how it represented the taming of the wild, unbridled mind, and its importance in creating the proper spiritual atmosphere for contemplation. They turned a simple, practical solution into a sacred mystery. The Buddha's wisdom reminds us, do not believe in traditions because they have been handed down for many generations.
This tale unveils how easily our lives become cluttered with meaningless rituals when we stop questioning their original purpose. Why do we continue practices long after their usefulness has ended? Zen Buddhism emphasizes the importance of understanding the spirit behind the form. The original teacher tied the cat to solve a specific problem, but over time, that measure was sacralized and analyzed as if it contained a profound spiritual truth that was never intended. Consider the various rules and customs in your own life. How many of them do you follow simply because that's how it's always been done? The monastery's cat represents all the empty forms we maintain out of habit rather than wisdom. This applies to our spiritual practices, our workplaces, and our families. What began as a raft to cross the river becomes a permanent shrine on the shore, and we forget that the goal was never the raft, but the crossing itself. True spiritual maturity involves continuously examining our habits to ensure they still serve their purpose, rather than preserving them merely because they have become familiar and comfortable. This willingness to look past the surface brings us to the formal chambers of the palace, where a powerful ruler sought a different kind of certainty. This is the teaching of the Emperor and Master Gudo. The Emperor of Japan, a man accustomed to receiving definitive, absolute answers from his advisors, had arranged a private audience with Gudo, one of the most respected Zen teachers of the age. The Emperor came with a genuine, heavy curiosity about the mysteries of life and death. Seated in the formal hall where matters of state were usually decided, he felt it was time to ask the question that had troubled his knights.
Master Gudo, the Emperor began, his voice carrying the weight of his authority.
I have a question that has troubled the greatest minds throughout history. What happens to a man of enlightenment after death? Surely someone of your spiritual attainment would understand such matters.
The Emperor was prepared for a profound discourse. He expected insights into rebirth, the eternal nature of consciousness, or perhaps a description of subtle realms beyond our own. He wanted a map of the afterlife from someone who claimed to have walked the path of awakening. Instead, Master Gudo looked at the Emperor with complete equanimity and gave the most honest answer possible. How should I know? The Emperor was taken aback, almost insulted. Here was a master revered throughout the land, essentially admitting ignorance about a fundamental spiritual question.
But Master, the Emperor pressed, his voice rising in disbelief, you are an enlightened teacher. Surely you must have special knowledge about such things.
Gudo's response was immediate, sharp, and perfectly logical.
Yes, sir, but not a dead one.
The simplicity of this exchange contains a profound teaching about the nature of genuine wisdom and the courage required for radical honesty. As the Buddha taught, true wisdom often begins with the fact of our own ignorance. This is the willingness to admit the limits of our knowledge rather than pretending to understand what cannot be known from our current position. Why do we expect our spiritual teachers, or even ourselves, to have answers to questions that can only be resolved through direct, lived experience? Zen Buddhism emphasizes the distinction between conceptual knowledge the maps we draw in our heads, and lived understanding.
Master Gudo's response was not a failure of wisdom. It was a demonstration of it. He refused to engage in speculation about experiences he had not yet had, even under the pressure of imperial authority. His honesty revealed more about the nature of truth than any elaborate theory of the afterlife could have provided. In our daily lives, we often feel a desperate pressure to appear knowledgeable, to offer confident opinions on things we do not truly understand. We pretend certainty to avoid the discomfort of the unknown. The Emperor's assumption that awakening should include a database of cosmic information reflects a common misconception. We imagine that enlightenment is the accumulation of answers, when it is actually the release of the need for them. In Zen, we cultivate don't know mind, a state of open, vibrant awareness that doesn't need to fill every gap with a theory.
This is not a state of dull ignorance, but a wise recognition that direct experience is infinitely more valuable than second-hand information. A living master knows about living. What happens after the final breath remains a mystery until the moment it is embraced. Gudo's teaching reveals the immense freedom that comes from releasing the need to have an opinion about everything. How much mental energy do we waste constructing elaborate scaffolds of belief about things we cannot possibly know? How much suffering is born from worrying about scenarios that exist only in our imagination? If you could look at the great mysteries of your life and say, "I don't know," with the same quiet confidence as Master Gudo, what weight would lift from your shoulders? The mystery of death is not honored by pretending to solve it, but by living authentically in the face of it. In a world full of false certainties and confident ignorance, the Master's honesty points toward a more genuine relationship with the unknown. This genuine relationship with the mystery of existence honors what cannot be categorized, while fully embracing what can be directly experienced. As we continue our journey through the wisdom of Zen Buddhism, let us explore a story about true spiritual power. A power that resides not in the spectacular or the supernatural, but in the profound simplicity of the everyday. This is the tale of the miracle of ordinary living. At Ryuman Temple, a renowned Zen master was sharing the Dharma with a large gathering of devoted students. The hall was filled with people sitting in quiet attention, their forms silhouetted against the evening light that filtered through the temple windows, creating an atmosphere of deep peace and contemplation. In the midst of his discourse, a disturbance arose near the back of the hall. A Shinshu priest, whose own temple had been losing followers to the master's growing reputation, pushed his way through the crowd with obvious agitation. His face was flushed with jealousy, and his movements were sharp with competitive energy, a stark contrast to the stillness of the room. The master paused his teaching and looked toward the commotion with patient curiosity. "What is this noise that interrupts our evening together?" he asked gently, his voice carrying no irritation despite the disruption. The priest stood up boldly, his voice rising above the murmur of the crowd in a boastful challenge. "The founder of our sect," he proclaimed loudly, "had such miraculous powers that he could hold a brush in his hand on one bank of a river, while his attendant held up a paper on the other bank. The teacher then wrote the holy name of Amida through the air, and it appeared perfectly on the paper. Can you do such a wonderful thing?" The gathered students turned their attention between the challenging priest and their teacher, curious how the master would respond to this test of his spiritual abilities. Some expected a demonstration of supernatural powers. Others wondered if their master would engage in a complex philosophical debate. The master smiled with the gentle amusement of someone who understood the priest's confusion completely. "Perhaps your fox can perform that trick," he replied lightly, "but that is not the manner of Zen. My miracle is that when I feel hungry, I eat,
and when I feel thirsty, I drink. The temple fell into a profound, heavy silence as the simple profundity of these words settled into the hearts of those present. The priest, expecting magical displays, found himself face to face with a teaching about the extraordinary nature of ordinary experience. The Buddha once said, "If you want to know your past, look at your present condition. If you want to know your future, look at your present actions." This ancient wisdom illuminates how real spiritual power manifests, not in supernatural demonstrations, but in complete presence to what is actually happening. Why do we seek the miraculous outside of our immediate experience? We often bypass the profound simplicity of life in search of dramatic spiritual events, imagining enlightenment as something exotic, removed from the laundry, the dishes, and the daily commute. In truth, it is the capacity to be fully present to whatever is arising. The heart of this lesson lies in understanding that consciousness itself is the ultimate miracle. The fact that you can taste food, feel the coolness of water, hear these words, or experience any sensation at all is more extraordinary than any magic trick. Yet we take these everyday miracles for granted, while seeking special powers that would somehow validate our worth. Look deeply at your own experience right now. Can you feel the miracle of breathing without having to think about it? The wonder of your heart beating steadily, a rhythmic drum keeping time with life itself? These are the real miracles available in every moment. Zen teacher Suzuki Roshi once taught, "Each of you is perfect the way you are, and you can use a little improvement." This paradox points to the understanding that we don't need to become someone special to access spiritual truth. We need to fully inhabit who we already are. The path is not about developing supernatural abilities, but about going all the way into the simple reality of this moment, starting exactly where you are with whatever you're experiencing right now. Consider how the priest's question revealed his own spiritual materialism, the belief that wisdom can be measured by impressive displays rather than by the quality of one's presence. This trap catches many seekers who mistake the extraordinary for the spiritual, when the truly spiritual is found in bringing complete attention to the ordinary. Tonight, as you prepare for rest or perhaps take a final sip of water, can you taste the miracle that the Master pointed to? Can you experience the wonder of the simple biological processes that sustain your life? The ray is not in the sky, the ray is in the heart, within the simple reality of being alive. This recognition of the present moment leads us to another vital teaching, the recognition of what was never born and can never die. This is the teaching of freedom from birth and death. In a quiet monastery garden where cherry blossoms drifted on the spring breeze, a dedicated student named Goshu approached the wise Zen master Uya. For years, Goshu had been practicing meditation and studying texts. Yet, despite his sincere efforts, he felt no closer to the enlightenment he desperately sought. He bowed respectfully, his face showing the strain of prolonged spiritual seeking. "Master," he said, "I have followed every instruction, but I feel as lost as when I began. What am I missing? What more must I do?" Uya looked at his earnest student with compassion, seeing the weight of spiritual ambition that had become a burden rather than a path to freedom. He understood that Goshu's very effort to achieve enlightenment had become the obstacle to recognizing his inherent awakeness. "There is no secret trick," Uya said simply. "It's just a matter of freedom from birth and death." Goshu's brow furrowed. "Master,
How does one pass through birth and death to freedom? That sounds like the most difficult task of all. Ua's eyes brightened and he raised his voice with sudden, startling intensity. Your every passing thought is birth and death. At these words, something shifted dramatically in Goshu's understanding. Like a veil suddenly lifted, he saw that what he had been seeking as some future attainment was actually the very nature of his present experience. The constant arising and passing away of thoughts, sensations, and emotions. This endless flow was not something to escape, but the very freedom he had been pursuing.
He felt as if he had put down a heavy burden he didn't even realize he had been carrying. All his years of struggling to become something special dissolved into the recognition that he had never been anything other than the aware space in which all experience appears and disappears. We suffer not because we lack something, but because we don't recognize the freedom that is our fundamental nature. We mistake ourselves for the stream of thoughts instead of recognizing ourselves as the riverbed. Every thought that arises is born. Every thought that fades away dies. This constant movement is not a problem to solve, but the very movement of life itself. When we identify with the flow, we suffer the anxiety of constant change. When we recognize ourselves as the awareness in which the flow appears, we discover unshakable peace.
This brings us to our final story, a tale that reveals how we might transform our relationship with the inevitable difficulties of life. This is the tale of the salt and the lake. In a quiet monastery nestled among rolling hills, an aging master lived with a young apprentice whose heart had become heavy with complaints. Each morning, the apprentice would arrive with fresh grievances. The meditation was too noisy, the floor was too hard, the weather was too cold. One morning, the master asked the student to bring him a handful of salt and a small glass of water. Place the salt in the glass and drink it, the master instructed. The apprentice obeyed, immediately grimacing as the intensely bitter taste filled his mouth. "How does it taste?" the master asked. "Bitter," the apprentice spat. "Terribly bitter." The master nodded and led the student to the shores of the pristine mountain lake.
"Now," the master said, "place another handful of salt into the lake."
The student did so, watching the crystals dissolve into the vast clear water. "Now, drink from the lake." The student cupped the water in his hands and drank. "How does it taste?" "Clean and pure," the student replied. "Do you taste the salt?" "No," said the student. "I don't taste any salt at all." The master sat beside his student and said, "The pain of life is pure salt. The amount of pain in existence remains constant, but the amount of bitterness we experience depends entirely on the container we put that pain into. Stop being a glass, my friend. Become a lake. Pain is certain, but suffering is optional. Our awareness is not fixed in size. It can contract into the narrow confines of a glass where every difficulty looms enormous, or it can expand into the spaciousness of a lake where the same difficulties dissolve into something much greater. Tonight, as you reflect on your own challenges, can you sense the difference between these two states of being? What would it feel like to allow your awareness to expand beyond the immediate intensity of your worries, to include the vast context of this moment? As we draw our time together to a close, let us reflect on the path we've traveled through these timeless teachings. We have learned to distinguish between authentic love and attachment, discovering that true compassion serves another's highest good. We have witnessed how fear transforms into power when we identify with the ocean rather than the wave. We have seen that the greatest treasures cannot be possessed, and that the path to awakening often follows unconventional forms. We have learned that the present moment contains joys as sweet as a strawberry, even when we are suspended between the challenges of the past and the future.
The Buddha taught that three things cannot be long hidden: the sun, the moon, and the truth. As you continue on your own path, may these stories remain with you, not as mere words, but as living invitations to experience life with greater presence and wisdom. The cricket still sings in the temple. The moon still shines freely for all who would receive its light, and the waves still roll with unstoppable power. These teachings are not relics of the past, but eternal principles speaking to your heart tonight. As your body settles into rest and your breathing naturally deepens, know that you carry within you all the wisdom these stories have revealed. The peace you've touched tonight is your own true nature. If these words have brought a sense of stillness to your evening, I invite you to subscribe and join our community of seekers, perhaps sharing in the comments which of these tales resonated most deeply with your soul. Your presence here is a part of this shared journey toward awakening. Thank you for sharing this sacred time with me. May you rest peacefully now, waking refreshed and carrying these ancient teachings into the light of a new day. May the wisdom of countless generations guide your steps, and may the compassion of the Buddha illuminate your way. Good night, and may your dreams be as vast and peaceful as the mountain lake.